Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm back with more Total War Warhammer 2 online action. Today we're back with Karl, Franz, and the Empire are going to be defending Altdorf against the High Elves, who seem to have become very angry for some reason. And now Tyrion is here with a force of High Elves at the gates of Altdorf, and Karl Franz, I guess, has something to answer for. We'll never know. But anyway, let's go ahead and get to the army compositions. For myself, I've got Karl Franz leading the Royal Altdorf Griffites, of course, for the anti-large armor-piercing goon squad. Karl Franz in particular, you can take both the Reichland Runefang and Stand Your Ground, stack both. You get a huge leadership buff and a 27 melee defense, 26 melee attack buff in total. He's also got Galmaraz for additional AP and a bonus versus large for himself so that he can duel big, nasty things more effectively. Got a unit of Zindler's Reichsguard to act as the vanguard for that force. They're going to screen this approach, since obviously I can't see anything that are in the woods over here. We've got 3 units of Outriders, and then the infantry line is going to be a whole mess of state troops. We've got 4 units of Spearmen with shields, 3 swordsmen, Sigmar's sons are in the center, and we've got another unit of Reichsguard hidden in the woods over here. So I often deploy my cavalry and lords and other heroes and high value units, if possible, hidden in the woods, just especially against factions that can bring artillery, just in case if they do have artillery I can potentially advance unseen with my more high value units, because of course if they can't see you they can't shoot at you, which my opponent did bring a couple of bolt throwers. In fact, he's got the 2 bolt throwers, 2 units of Phoenix Guard, 4 White Lions, which I'm not the biggest fan of. You guys probably know that by now, maybe not, but he's also got 3 units of Archers, Tyrion, and a High Mage. High Mage is a great choice against the Empire because typically people bring Flying Lords. Boris Todbringer, of course, up on his Griffin is a very common choice, so Tempest will be great. Soul Quench is an interesting one, and not seeing Apotheosis is very strange. You pretty much always want healing if you can get it, and High Magic does afford you the ability to bring healing and other utility spells, so I definitely would recommend always bringing Apotheosis if you're bringing High Magic, although he does have a Life Mage as well who has just Earthblood and Life Bloom. But I think it's more efficient, rather than having to bring this whole other caster, you can just take Apotheosis with the High Mage and get some value that way. But, there's definitely some discussion to be had there. Without further ado, let's go ahead and kick the battle into full gear, and we'll watch as my forces approach. Of course, like I said, I'm going to be bringing my high-value cavalry up through this approach. That way, this distance to advance is much less than, say, this distance. So it's going to be advantageous in that way, because these Eagle Claw bolt throwers won't be shooting at my more high-value cavalry. Instead, they're shooting at my Outriders, and which is not a bad target. I mean, the armor-piercing missiles of the Outriders are going to be a pretty big danger to the elite Phoenix Guard in particular, which are a great choice against the Empire. You need something to deal with Empire cavalry. Dragon Princes can do a pretty good job, although the Royal Altdorf squad with the buffs will take down Dragon Princes. Without, I'm not sure. I'd have to do some testing, probably. It might be a little atrocious, but yeah, you can see Empire State troops advancing under heavy fire here. These spearmen with shields being sacrificed for their city in front of its gates here. But it is a worthy sacrifice, certainly, to be protecting the more high-value units. Just don't tell the state troops I said that. But yeah, you can see Empire, the Outriders, starting to turn the corner here. My opponent is going to be screening with this Phoenix Guard. We're also going to push this Reichsguard that's visible up and around this way. And now we've sprung the Royal Altdorf squad and the Zindler's Reichsguard from the forest. Going to be pushing through. And the Phoenix Guard are here in a stationary position. So we're going to fix them in place with Spearmen. And then I'm going to feint in and then immediately pull away and collapse in on the side of these White Lions, because of course they don't have anti-large. They're already engaged by a unit of spearmen, so we can potentially get a pretty decent terror route here going. We've got all the buffs active, so you can see the Altdorf Griffites up to 68 attack, 65 defense. Zindler's Reichsguard come in and take down a unit of artillery. Meanwhile, again, just going to fix these high-value units in place with some cheap spearmen, and then try and get my Reichsguard up and around. I actually am going to forget about this unit momentarily. Some of my Outriders also do get caught up there, but the other unit, the Zindler's Reichsguard, just rampaging around the back line. There's only really archers and artillery crew back here. There's not really, there's no Lothard Sea Guard or spearmen or anything like that to hold the line here. So these Zindler's Reichsguard are just going to have their way with this Elven backfield. It's going to be a very bad situation. You can see that unit of White Lions that I collapsed on is shattered. Tyrion came in here to try and correct things, but that was a very bold move and a terrible mistake, because now he's surrounded by Royal Altdorf Griffites and Spearmen, and Karl Franz himself is sitting in the wings waiting to get his turn. Unfortunately, not in base contact at the moment because there's some people in the way, but nonetheless, he's taken a lot of damage. It's really not a good situation for him, and he can't get away, most importantly. We've managed to turn the corner with these Outriders, and now going to be focused firing on this unit of Phoenix Guard. So we'll watch as the shots start to open up, and the Spearmen actually do rout at that point. But it's enough. We've managed to get this little high ground advantage here and start to fire in on these Phoenix Guard, which, although they do have physical resistance, they don't have any missile block chance, so the full brunt of any missile that actually hits a model will be applied. There's no chance to block the missile. But yeah, the High Mage and the Life Mage, both relatively safe, but just kind of getting bowled over and knocked around. They're not really contributing a whole lot. I haven't seen any Soul Quench or Tempest. I mean, at this point, the High Mage is basically a liability. But the Phoenix Guard, this is one of the issues with Elite Tier Halberds, is you really just can't... If the cavalry runs in the other direction, that's kind of a good counter to Elite Tier Halberds. I mean, obviously, it can be hard to crack them in the late game situation, and they are still a good choice to bring, but you can see how I'm just able to just steamroll with this massive cavalry death blob over onto this side where the anti-large troops are not. We're going to just try and go after the white lines as much as possible with the Reichsguard and the Royal Altdorf squad, and of course any archers or artillery crew that rally back to this area. Most of them have been routed off, but at this point we're allowing the Outriders to get some good fire in. Franz, the Royal Altdorf Griffites are getting pretty low, but Franz is perfectly healthy. Tyrion is getting pretty low as well. No Heart of Averlorn quite yet. I don't know, did he actually bring it? Yes, he did, so he could potentially get that proc here. Franz looks like he's going to be pulling away here, and again, the Phoenix Guard are in this situation, so we don't necessarily want to be here with my Knights, so we're going to go ahead and pull out and just wait for things to reform a little bit. There are some archers rallied here that we can go ping-pong into, and I also want to try and form up all my cavalry into one pocket for an Earthblood. I've had my Lifecaster, for most of the battle, he was just sitting in this patch of forest right here hidden, so my opponent couldn't see him. I was just casting spells from there, but I got a little bit closer here because the range of Earthblood is relatively short, but yeah, we're going to be trying to form up all the cavalry into one big blob, and if you have watched my How to Read Stat Card video, shameless plug, you'll know that healing low model count units is better, generally because they have you know, the HP per model and so on. They have more, and yeah, in general, with the lower model count units, you're going to get more effectiveness just because less of the unit models have the capacity to go down. So the cavalry are going to be really the focus for the Empire, of course, unless you have like a steam tank or something like that. But Tyrion was going to come over here and then realized, oh, this is a really bad situation, I'm all alone, and then runs away. The Heart of Averlorn does save him from the Outrider fire there, but at this point the balance power is pretty far against the High Elves, although they are winning the infantry battle, no doubt. My state troops are scattering to the wind, some of them still holding out very well. Of course, the Sigmar Sons will hold until they all go down, but it has allowed the cavalry to get the work done that it needs to. So you can see we're just kind of wheeling around, going in all directions, not allowing these Phoenix Guard to really ever get a solid engagement, and just forming up a concave with these Outriders and continuously firing in. Been able to wear down both units of Phoenix Guard just through attrition, despite how tanky those units are with their high armor, physical resistance, and everything else. Yeah. Because they're unbraced, I was going to go for a charge, but you know, I decided, maybe not. Let's go ahead and pull away and just fix them in place with these Spearmen. Meanwhile, Royal Altdorf Squad and Franz kind of shooting this gap here. Again, we're trying to just continuously wheel around with the cavalry until we can get a favorable engagement. And now where Tyrion starts to get a little bit separated, we're going to try and collapse in here. There's only white lines. The Phoenix Guard have been interrupted by the Spearmen. So now we're going to collapse with the Royal Altdorf Squad and try and go for the killing blow here against Tyrion. If we can get rid of him, the rest of the High Elf leadership will crumble. So you can see he's surrounded by Empire Knights at this point. He does have the Life Mage by his side. There's some very tattered Phoenix Guard. In fact, 7 and dropping because of the Outrider fire there. Nice Sunfang going down. Didn't actually finish off any unit models, I don't think. It doesn't look like it, but yeah, at this point, a lot of the High Elf forces who are not immune to psychology, I don't think actually any of these units are immune to psychology, you're going to start being terror-routed by the Royal Altdorf Griffites, who, although they're very low, are still on the field. Tyrion himself gets terrified, and that's enough to send the rest of the High Elf forces into a chain rout. So, well played to my opponent. Hope you guys enjoyed watching. You know, I know a lot of people say that the Empire is relatively underpowered, and I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. I think they're one of the harder factions to use, certainly, and I also think that most people play with the wrong paradigm. It's a fact of life that higher tier Empire infantry is not cost effective. Great swords, flagellants, halberdiers, all not cost effective. The only unit in that price bracket that is the Sigmar's Sons, and they're a regiment of renowned swordsmen. The swordsmen and spearmen, on the other hand, are cheap. They allow you to put a lot of numbers on the field, and they're relatively cost effective. I mean, they're not going to do anything crazy. They're not a cure-all, but they can perform well in the right situation, and acting as an anvil, at the very least, for your more important units to get the work done is the way that you really need to go. The Empire very much requires a combined arms, and you can't really invest too much into any one area, I think, at least with how things are right now. But yeah, Franz and the Royal Altdorf squad didn't have too many big high-value targets to hunt, like dragons, but in the end they were enough to take down Tyrion, and they also collapsed several units of White Lions very quickly. The buffs with Franz make these Royal Altdorf Griffites even more scary. No pun intended, of course, because they cause terror. But anyway, Reiksguard also over 100 kills against the High Elves. Very, very strong. Just completely collapsing that back line because, again, with the Empire, because your units are cheaper, you can bring greater numbers. You fix them with your cheap infantry and then just run rampant with your cavalry. And we were able to do that with the Reiksguard, the Royal Altdorf Griffites, and Franz. Of course, the Outriders, because I had such a decisive mobility advantage, were able to get around and turn the corner and start to fire in pretty much unopposed. And again, my opponent didn't really bring any heavy cavalry. Tyrion was mounted, but that was pretty much his only mobile unit. And the Empire's strength comes from its guns and its cav, both of which you can counter with your own cavalry. So if we go ahead and take a look at the High Elves here, let's go to, the High Elves. So now obviously much of this will be changing when the DLC comes out. But in general, you want to at least try and contest the cav game with the Empire and not just give it up completely. So Dragon Princes, of course, are an incredibly strong unit of cavalry. They'll beat any Empire cavalry except for the Royal Altdorf Griffites. If you get a clean charge, they might even beat regular Demigryph Knights with halberds. I don't know 100%. I would need to test that. But they're very good units, particularly if you support them well. If you support with something like a Frostheart Phoenix, for example, which, again, relatively expensive, but in terms of getting this cash, I would say you really don't need White Lions in the front line. Spearmen are more than enough to take care of most Empire troops, and they also are going to give you, of course, that anti-large versus cavalry, and it allows you to go with spending your points in other areas. Similar strategy. You'll notice I'm kind of using a similar strategy here with both the Empire and the High Elves to go with relatively cheap infantry, because in that matchup, really the killing power isn't going to be done by the infantry. I mean, it can be, but it's going to be more favorable to you if you can at least contest the mobility game. So just some cheap spearmen for the front line will do. Tyrion's a solid choice. Teclis is also a solid choice, but for the sake of this, we'll go with Tyrion. I usually cut Foe Seeker because he's already pretty fast. Same thing with Stand Your Ground. Elves already have, the High Elves at least, already have pretty good melee defense and leadership, so you don't necessarily always need this. If you have the extra funds, it can be worthwhile, certainly. Feint and Riposte I'll usually keep, and then the two items, Heart of Avalorn. If you have healing, I don't know that this is really worthwhile. It's 240 points is quite a bit, especially with the High Elves. You need to try and pinch every penny you can just to try and get more units on the field, I think. Sunfang is always good, so I'll take that in this particular matchup. And then, High Mage. I wouldn't worry about the Life Mage. Just take the High Mage and take Apotheosis and Tempest. And then, if you have the extra funds, you can maybe go with Hand of Glory for extra melee attack and reload skill, or maybe Arcane Unforging if you have more extra money. It does pretty good direct damage and also adds ability recharge. So if you're facing like a Witch Hunter or something, for example, it can add an ability recharge to all their abilities and spells too. So great to use against spellcasters. But yeah, it gives you a lot cheaper of a caster, and that way you're not having to spend extra money bringing in another caster. And, the Eagle Claw Bolt Throwers are not a terrible idea. You could probably grab a couple of those. Lothern Seaguard, because you're probably going to be facing some heavy cavalry, might be a better pick in the back line. It's hard to say. You do want some kind of missile play to help counter, handgunners and outriders and things like that. But yeah, something like this, and then maybe you could toss in a couple of White Lions to help deal with Empire infantry, or Maybe you go with another Dragon Prince. There's a few different things you can do, but the key here is that you support with the Frostheart Phoenix, the Dragon Princes, because it's very mobile as well, and because it has this -9 melee attack, -10% armor piercing aura, it helps the Dragon Princes be even more tanky. They're already a very tanky unit, but this helps them be even more tanky. And the Frostheart Phoenix itself, of course, does armor piercing. It doesn't have the biggest splash attack, but it does a pretty decent amount of damage. Fear and terror, all that jazz. So something like this against the Empire, or even Bretonnia, would probably be pretty decent. But let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. How do you like to go about countering, I know it's weird to say this, but countering Empire as the High Elves? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you do like this kind of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button, so every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Your support means everything to me, so thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.